Hello, everyone. It's great to see you out here. Thanks for coming to learn what's going on in the fishing industry and see how it might help your business. We have lots of great research we're going to talk about today. We will cover participation trends. We're going to talk about tackle sales, angler insights, and we're going to share some of our predictions and give you all some free resources you can take back to your own business. So I'm going to kick it off with participation trends, and I'll just give you a really quick background on what I do at the Recreational Boating and Fishing Foundation. Our mission is to increase participation in fishing. We exist to create customers for your businesses. So it's very important that we have a good understanding of what's happening out there in the marketplace. We need to know, who are those underrepresented groups we need to bring in. We need to understand what the avids need. So we run a report every year called the Special Report on Fishing. It's produced in partnership with the Outdoor Foundation, and it gives us a pulse on what's happening on an annual basis. And that's primarily the report I'm going to be referencing today. So let's start with the big picture. Overall, fishing participation is up to 57.7 million. That's an all-time high since we've been tracking. You can see, obviously, there's some ups and downs over the last several years. You see that COVID bump in there. But generally speaking, we've been trending upwards. Really, what's even more impressive about that is when you look at it as a percentage of the population, we hit 19% this year. That's the highest percentage of the US population we have seen since 2007. That's a pretty flat line there, but obviously 1 percentage point of the US pop can make a big difference. Our key audiences, we're trying to increase fishing participation, trying to reach out to audiences who have never done it before. And so some of our key audiences for growth include children, females, Hispanic Americans, and Black Americans. And if you look at this kind of 5-year snapshot on each, you can see that we are seeing gains in each one of those. Are we at where the US population is? No, we have a lot of work to do, but I think it's really promising to see these groups gaining. In addition, the three that are starred there are women, our Hispanics, and our Black participants. They hit all-time high numbers this year as well. So we're pretty excited about that. Some more good news, we track the number of new people that come to fishing this year, and it went up just ever so slightly, but at a very healthy 4.19 million newcomers to fishing. We also saw 11.2 million returning. But we still have one really big challenge, and if you were at the breakfast this morning, it was talked about a little bit. Attrition. That churn, that leaky bucket. We're pouring all these new participants in the top, but people are falling out the bottom. And as you can see, it's kind of a disturbing long-term trend. Back in 2014, we were at 5.7 million. The last few years, of course, following COVID, was really, really big, but we have maintained like that 12 or 12.2 million drop. Not good. All right, so I'm going to take a pause here and turn it over to Ben to talk about tackle sales.
All right, thanks a lot, Stephanie. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Ben Scuderi. I am lead economist and a senior analyst at Southwick Associates. If you're not familiar with Southwick Associates, we are a research firm that specializes in sport fishing. We work really closely with the ASA. We also do some work on the hunting and shooting sports side. But we're happy to be able to share some of our insights on tackle sales. What I want to do here is I want to take a look back at the past couple years, what we've seen in terms of tackle sales, and then bring us up to where we are in 2024. But before I do that, I want to really briefly mention some of the resources that I'm relying on to give you some of these insights. So Southwick Associates does a quarterly online survey of anglers where we ask about participation as well as their purchases. We also track excise taxes that are paid on fishing equipment. We find that that's a really good proxy for new fishing equipment sales. We also track imports of fishing tackle as well as fishing participation based on license sales. So Stephanie had some really great information that's from a survey We are looking at license sales, a slightly different data source. It's important to keep in mind that they don't necessarily show the same trends. Not all fishing activity has to be licensed, but we do find that fishing license sales are a pretty good proxy for fishing participation, so I'm going to share some information on that as well. So looking back at 2020, as we all know, there was a global pandemic. It ended up being a really good opportunity for the sport fishing industry. So participation grew substantially, and tackle sales ended up reaching an all-time high. Large tackle retailers ended up performing the best. A lot of this was because of some of these new participants. They weren't necessarily comfortable walking into an independent tackle retailer, but they ended up shopping at places that they are already familiar with. So places, big box stores, places like Amazon, Walmart ended up doing really well in the height of the pandemic. Obviously, there was a lot of online shopping going on during that time. And what we saw were that prices increased industry-wide. Now, part of this was because of really strong demand for fishing tackle, but a big part of it was because of supply chain issues, which sort of increased the cost of doing business. In fact, if there hadn't been so many supply chain disruptions, we may have seen even greater highs than we saw during that peak pandemic in terms of tackle sales, but there were some issues getting product to retail, as a lot of you know. So towards the end of 2021, the pandemic began to wane, and a lot of people went back to some of those activities they weren't able to do during the height of the pandemic, things like going to movies, going to concerts. And so what we saw in terms of license sales was that license sales started to decline in the second half of 2021. Moving on to 2022, we really saw a continuation of what we'd seen at the end of 2021, with fishing license sales continuing to decline. In fact, by the end of 2023, we saw that fishing license sales were only about 5% above 2019 levels, so again, nearing pre-pandemic levels. Fishing tackle sales also decreased during that time, but those price increases that we saw during the pandemic appear to have stuck around. Those larger retailers, the one that experienced the greatest gains during the pandemic, they ended up experiencing the greatest losses as a lot of those newcomers, stopped fishing, went back to some of those other activities. Retail inventories ended up being relatively high during this period. So we talked about supply chain disruptions and limited inventory at retail during the height of the pandemic. Well, what ended up happening is a lot of that product ended up reaching retail really around the same time that demand was declining. So that led to higher than normal inventories at some retailers. And what that meant was the replenishment orders, those wholesale orders, ended up being down in 2022 and 2023. All right, so that brings us up to 2024 and where we are today. And what we estimate is that fishing tackle sales are still in that moderate decline that we'd been seeing through 2023. The latest excise tax data for the first quarter of 2024 is down about 8% compared to 2023 levels. So again, that's not a perfect proxy for new fishing tackle sales, but we do feel like it's a pretty good indicator, at least directionally. In terms of license sales, so far in 2023 or 2024, we're a little bit down compared to this time in 2023. If you see this graph here that I'm showing, this is actually a new resource that we have available. It's a partnership of a lot of different organizations, but it's led by the Council to Advance Hunting and Shooting Sports, and we're calling this our real-time license dashboard. So what you're seeing here are daily license transactions. We work with about 15 states who send those license transactions to us directly, and we're able to show what's going on with fishing license sales on a real-time basis. You can see that darker line is 2024, and the lighter one is the same period in 2023, and it's difficult to tell from the daily transactions, but we are just a few percentage points below where we were in 2023 at this point, and this runs from January 1st, 24 to around the end of June, so pretty recent data. If you're interested in this data source, when we wrap up, I'll tell you how you can get access to those insights. So I'm going to change gears a little bit. I'm going to give you some angler insights. These are from that online survey of anglers that I mentioned. So we use that online survey of anglers, we ask about purchases, we ask about participation, but we also use it as an opportunity to ask anglers what is keeping them from participating and what's keeping them from purchasing so far in 2024. And what we're finding is it's a variety of different economic factors. So inflation is something that's being mentioned by a lot of anglers, high prices not just in our industry but across the economy. That's really coupled with changes of personal income, so wage growth really hasn't matched what we've seen in terms of inflation, and those two factors are kind of coming together to bring an economic pinch to some households, especially lower income households. And then there's economic uncertainty. Despite the fact that the US economy is relatively strong right now, a lot of people are concerned about the future of the economy. We have a presidential election looming in November, obviously, and that always injects some uncertainty into the economy. So really important to recognize that your customers, they're price conscious, they're budget conscious right now, and they're concerned about the future in terms of economic stability. We've also been asking anglers about their top preferences for fishing information, and what we found is no surprise, but anglers are online more than ever before. Actually, a third of anglers listed YouTube as well as other social media sites among their top 3 preferences for fishing information. And actually, the only source that was higher than those two were direct conversations with friends and family. So really important to realize that your customers, they're online, they're on YouTube and social media. Those are great places to connect with your customers if you're not already doing so. All right, I'm going to pass it back to Stephanie for some more insights from RBFF.
Thank you. Really quick, just kind of bridging off of something you were just talking about with the YouTube and that people are consuming more and more content online. Our digital properties, our YouTube and TikTok, believe it or not, have soared in traffic. And not just the entertaining fun videos. I mean, people are really digging into these instructional videos, the how-to knots, the how-to this. And our company, under the brand takemefishing.org, that's our consumer brand, you can share any of those on your business sites by embedding the videos. You can share them on your social channels. All that content is free to you all, so I encourage you to take advantage of it. So clearly, you know, I came out of the gate with participation's up and everything's great and everything's record high, and Ben comes up and says, but tackle sales are down and all these other, you know, fishing license sales are down. There's clearly a disparity in the data, and as Ben mentioned, you know, what we do is a survey versus them looking at sales. But something that we're seeing out of the data that I just wanted to bring up as potentially one possibility for why we're seeing this disparity is around, we're seeing a trend in our data that avid anglers are fishing less and less over time. What used to be, you know, 50 plus days a year fishing is now down to, I'm just making this up, 45 or 40. It's trending down. So they're fishing less and they're buying less. And this is a cohort that's buying expensive product, high-end product, right? Then you've got your occasional anglers, the newcomers to the activity. They're growing in size. The numbers of these people coming in is really, really growing and expanding. But they're not buying that expensive equipment yet. And they're not replacing their equipment as often yet, because they're not using it as much. So that could be one reason, you know, I'm sure there are other explanations as well, but that could be one thing contributing to that. I wanted to talk a little bit about removing the barriers to participation because I think there are some really simple things that we can all do to help people connect and feel community in fishing and be successful on the water. When we look at our data, we see, you know, the reasons for stopping. Time is always number one, which I think is total BS, to be honest, because you make time for things that are important to you. It's boring. I have physical limitations, or I've lost interest. What's interesting is lack of time and physical limitations really jumped up from last year. They were a lot, or the physical limitations and the time were lower down in the list. So I don't know if there's something there, but something to keep an eye on. Obstacles to enjoyment. These are reasons people didn't have fun out on the water, and things that they need to make it better. They need local information on nearby bodies of water. They need easier, more affordable access to equipment, to boats. They need mobile guides they can access on the water, and how-tos and tutorial videos. So that kind of ties back to what we were saying with them is seeking out that online content. It's like you don't necessarily have to create it from scratch. You know, borrow from takemefishing.org, borrow from others in the industry. And if you have a shop, if you have a store, I mean, simply asking a customer, hey, do you know where you're going? Do you need some advice on where to go? Do you have your license? You know, they need that support to be successful out on the water. All right, so moving into predictions, I just have one quick slide on this, and then I'll pass it back over to Ben. In the special report on fishing, we do ask folks if they're going to participate this coming year. And we saw some strong numbers there. 99%, believe it or not, said they are going to fish in 2024. We'll see how that works out. But 34% that they would plan 20 or more outings. 38% said they were planning 8 to 20 outings. And 27% were expecting fewer than 8 outings in 2024. So with that, I will turn it back over to Ben.
Awesome. Thank you, Stephanie. All right, so what I'm going to do now is give you some of our projections, what we're seeing for the rest of 2024 into the beginning of 2025. For those of you who attended this talk last year, you might have heard my boss, Rob Southwick, give our projections for 2023. What you're going to hear from me is relatively similar. What we see is that this is a relatively stable period for the sport fishing industry. It's not necessarily a bad thing. We may be down from the highs that we saw during the pandemic, but we're still relatively strong from a historical perspective. It's really important to keep that in mind. So kind of just summarizing the things we've talked about, we see fishing activity in terms of license sales back down around 2019 levels. Inflation is definitely still a concern for your customers, although it does appear to be stabilizing so far in 2024. Employment remains really strong right now. It's kind of a double-edged sword for our industry. When employment is strong, people don't often have as much time to go fishing, but they do have more money in their pocket to make purchases. So again, kind of a double-edged sword. Our predictions are that fishing participation should remain steady, barring an economic downturn. If we do see a recession and we see unemployment increase, then again, people might be spending more time fishing, and they'll be purchasing consumables, but they may not be purchasing those bigger ticket items or upgrading their tackle, so something to keep in mind. In terms of angler purchases, we expect those to hold steady around 2019 levels. That's in terms of units. It's important to remember that inflation, those higher prices have stuck around, so I do expect sales dollars to be higher, but in terms of units, around 2019 levels. From the manufacturer or wholesaler perspective, really important to recognize that inventories at retail are returning to normal levels or have already returned to normal levels. Again, we talked about some shortages during the pandemic and then some higher than normal inventories. So far in 2024, we're seeing that a lot of that has resolved, so important to keep in mind. Imports of fishing tackle are down substantially from what we saw after the height of the pandemic when we were trying to restock after those record sales. Interest rates are still an issue, but hopefully we may be receiving some relief from the Fed, if not later this year, then at the beginning of 2025. So our predictions are that wholesale orders should show gradual growth through 2024, but we would expect more of those just-in-time requests as retailers try to get the right product in their store at the right time. All right, so I'm going to talk about the available resources we have for you. And a lot of the things that I've covered are actually available for free to ASA members. So Southwick Associates puts together every year an annual market size report on the sport fishing industry, where we show the size of the industry by the different products that are sold. That is free to ASA members. It's also available from us as Southwick Associates if you're not an ASA member, but I do highly recommend that you consider becoming an ASA member because of all of these really valuable research that I've shared with you today. So if you're interested in doing that, reach out to Rob Russell. He is the membership coordinator at ASA. If you'd like to purchase a report from us, please find myself. We have Nancy Bacon also walking the floor, and my boss, Rob Southwick, is here. We can help get you any of those reports that you need and answer any questions about research. We also do an annual independent fishing tackle retailer report that we do every year where we ask independent retailers about their business. We do a quarterly tackle imports report that's available right now on ASA's website. And coming very soon are our 2022 economic impact of sport fishing estimates. And that's really important research that we do that shows the importance of our industry to the entire US economy. And it's also something that ASA staff use in their really important government affairs work. So that is coming soon. Keep an eye out for that. In terms of research from Southwick Associates, we do a quarterly and an annual report based on that survey of anglers I talked about. We look at things like market share by brand, sales by retail channel, and a whole lot more. We also have a report where we look at anglers' media preferences. We also cover hunters and target shooters in that report as well, for those who work on both sides. And we also do custom research. So if you have a question, you're not sure what type of information you need to make a decision, please reach out to us. That's what we specialize in, getting you the right information so you can make the right decisions for your business. And then finally, talked about that real-time license dashboard that is available through the Council to Advance Hunting and the Shooting Sports website. I have the link to their website up there. It's available now. If you want to check it out, it's really interesting. They have real-time fishing license sales as well as hunting licenses. And I'm going to pass it back to Stephanie one more time for the resources from RBFF.
Thank you. So, as I mentioned before, our mission is to get newcomers into fishing and to support the industry with the tools that you need to engage with your own customers. Everything we produce is free to the industry to use. And one of the things we've got, well, let me back up a second. We've got marketing materials, we've got photo libraries, we've got all kinds of content that you can use. But one of the things that's been rated the most valuable year over year is our research reports. So I want to point out a couple of those here. Joanne, raise your hand. This infographic that's on your screen, if you'd like a copy of that, just pop over and see her when we're finished. You could also get it by scanning the QR code on the screen right there. Coming soon, we just finished a 4-phase research project around the psychology of churn. You know how I said before, people make the excuse time. I don't go fishing because I don't have time. We wanted to really dig into that to understand what's going on in someone's mind when they decide to walk away from fishing and never come back. So we did this really extensive study. It took a year, and we're getting ready to roll out those results. And on that page, you can also find some information about that, along with a link to register for a webinar where we're going to start rolling out those results. So I encourage you to take a look at that. And you'll be smack in the middle of our resource center if you go there. So there's lots of other information for you as well. So with that, Ben and I thank you very much for your time. And I guess we open it up to questions, if there's any questions. No questions. Nobody? Nothing? Really? Oh, question.
My question has to do with your attrition. Have you looked at any other related industries that they're seeing the same trend, like camping, cycling, other industries that might be experiencing the same thing?
I haven't seen the same level of churn that we're experiencing, or the same trend exactly, but I know that a lot of participation trends, and that trend we were talking about with the avids going out less and the occasionals going more, that is a general outdoor industry trend. That's happening across a lot of activities. So I wouldn't be surprised if there's one in there that has a similar attrition issue.
And just a quick follow-up, are you guys, any retailers doing creative things that are reacting to this trend, maybe at the national level?
I'm glad you asked that, and I would love to know if any retailers are doing anything amazing. Actually, we just brought on someone new, JD Strong. He was here a minute ago. There he is, right there, to lead our industry engagement efforts. We want to do more to support the industry in this retention effort. So certainly, if you know of any examples, we want to start creating case studies that we can share with the industry to highlight those and educate others.